Okay, let's. Mm, Cool, we are live. Hey everyone, thanks for joining and welcome back to the another second episode of This is Tech Talks. And today we have a really special guest, Majid, joining us with my co-host Jay. Hey Majid, hey Jay.
Hey,
Hello.
Thanks for joining. Okay, so today we are going to talk about, of course, as you know, Majid is really famous in Flutter community. So we'll start with what is new in Flutter, and we recently had a release about Flutter, and then Majid will walk us through what is new things or what performance enhancements which is done, and then we'll talk about his experience about interviews, and then some tips in case you're interested. Majid has a lot of tips, and we'll also share the link to his blog post which he recently wrote, which was really interesting, sharing his journey about how he started giving interviews and then his learning about the interviews. So first of all, thanks a lot, Majid, for giving us your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have one question for you before you get into all of that Santosh mentioned. What is Flutter? I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't really know very much about Flutter, and I feel like some
Here we
other people
go.
might not either.
Yeah, sure. Flutter is love, you know. No, just kidding. Well, Flutter is a framework or it's a UI toolkit as per se. Like this is a framework that you can create a cross-platform application. It's not only supporting iOS, Android, but also web, Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. So you pretty much have all the different operating systems under your hand. So you can just write one code, and that's going to be Dart code, and then Flutter will take care of the UI, and then you will compile your and build your application for different platforms. So this is like a long time somehow let's say a wish for developer, right, to have a framework, to have one code base and then compile to every platform. But it seems like we are getting, well, Flutter supports right now all of these platforms. There are some advantages and disadvantages per operating system, but then at least what I can say is you can have one code base, one language, and then you can actually build for all of them. So, and
Nice.
it's getting much better every day, to be honest. So it has a very vibrant community and a very active team who are amazingly support Flutter and Flutter community these days.
Sweet. And Dart is another kind of typed TypeScript or typed JavaScript, right?
Yeah, Dart is actually a language which is around for maybe about 12 years or 10 years. It's not very new language. It's supposed to be a replacement for JavaScript way back. So Google actually created Dart 1 at that time. Like I think it's 10 years or 11 years ago, or even a little bit more. And so they intended to actually ship the Dart compiler into the browser and then let the developer actually write Dart instead of JavaScript. But uh, we don't talk about the history and what happened and stuff like that. But in fact, they didn't success. That's the result, right? And then they started to evolving the language because they were using Dart internally in Google. They invented the language itself. So it's Dart. One was very familiar to actual JavaScript developers. It was not that type, let's say, strong as it is today, or a lot of features that it was not there today. We have many of the features. And in fact, there was a framework for, initially, Dart was for creating like front end applications, right? So for like building websites and stuff like that, UI applications. And we had actually Angular Dart. So it's although they depreciated like a year ago or something, I think they don't support it anymore in favor of the TypeScript version. But if Google itself like build a lot of UI with Angular Dart.
Hmm.
And and then now Flutter came, not now, I mean, it's like 4 years almost, or 5 years, or even more that they have been working on that. But the last 3 years is stable. And Dart 2 was introduced. And the Dart 2 is actually before Flutter, but it's a it seems like a new language completely. It's very fairly similar to Java and very fairly similar to C sharp, for example. So if you come from these languages, you feel home somehow. You have almost similar, concepts in Dart. It's a heavily object-oriented programming language, but at the same time, it also supports all the cool features of like scripting languages like Python or JavaScript, for example. So like you can also feel home if you come from JavaScript, for example, because you can kind of make the typing or the strong typing work similar to, like, let's say TypeScript, not that strong, not that loose, or and also you can compile Dart to JavaScript and other, ways of compiling. There's also possibilities in Dart. And it's a fairly simple language. So to be honest, if you have worked with JavaScript, nothing else. If you come to Dart, I think within maybe a couple of hours or a day, you can simply write your Dart code and you feel home. And if you know like C sharp and like Java or these type of languages, so it's maybe an hour so that you can simply learn and start coding.
Nice.
Um, yeah, that's Dart technically.
Cool. Okay. On to Santosh's questions then.
Yeah, I remember when you mentioned Dart. I remember in early days there were like three languages which was supported for Angular: JavaScript, TypeScript, and Dart. I was like, okay, which one to choose? Thank God they dropped all those two and went ahead with TypeScript.
That's good.
So we have Maxime in chat. So hey, thanks a lot, Maxime, for joining us. So
Hey, Maxime.
we recently got Flutter new release, right? I'm sure because I follow a lot of community members from Flutter and they were really excited about it. So can you just tell us what's new or what is the most exciting feature you liked?
Yeah, well, it's a lot happening right now in for Flutter. To be honest, like we had in March, Flutter 2 coming with a lot of new features, a lot of improvement, especially for platforms such as web and Mac OS and Linux and desktop version, for example. And then hence we had like another version 2.5 last week, and it was again a lot of new improvement to Flutter, and we got excited because we work with this framework every day. We build our application, and then we feel like sometimes this it doesn't work. And the good thing
Mhm.
about Flutter is that the team is listening to the community actively. Like you just go and ping like the director of the Flutter or Dart, the product owners, and they say this is a problem. You highlight the issues, and the community will just come and say, yeah, this issue is very important. Let's get it fixed. Some people go and send PRs to make this process faster. The team will take care of that, and then within some like very major one will just get fixed within a very short time. And that's a very good thing that I see in Flutter community these days. But then there was a couple of news recently which it was exciting around desktop version of the Flutter, because there are a lot of new improvement for desktop version around Mac, Linux, and Windows. Some news about like probably building Flutter application for Xbox version, Xbox, and things like that. And recently, Flutter web team they put a lot of effort to gather information from the community. I was also actively participating in all of them. And finally, they released a roadmap based on the request from the community and say, yeah, we're going to actually fix this. And guess what? Some of the main problems that everyone was talking about, like maybe the performance of the Flutter web, the initial load, the bundle size, the SEO and things like that, which is, well, it's not as perfect as the other frameworks, to be honest. We should be honest. It works, but then it's not a competitor to like React or Angular, for example. But
what's the thing you're most excited for from the roadmap?
Yeah, I think this is exactly what I'm very excited about, because at the moment Flutter Web has like some use cases. So if you are building, let's say, a dashboard which user will log in, and you don't need SEO, you don't need like things like that, then it might be a good fit. But if you want to build like a Jamstack style application or like a normal landing page, it might not fit very well because you need SEO, you need performance. The scrolling sometimes it feels like native application. It doesn't like web. So they're gonna bring these native web, let's say, behavior to Flutter Web, which makes me very excited. I was actually a web developer. I was in the Angular community for a long time, so this makes me so excited, to be honest.
Nice. That's awesome.
I mean, I saw some PRs in Angular repo actually when I was going through the contributors list. So, how was your transition from Angular to Flutter?
It's actually very funny. Actually, I was an Ember developer back then. Before like Angular JS, during that time we had Ember. We still have Ember. It still has its own community. I was an Ember developer because I was hired in a company that they were doing Ruby, like with Ruby on Rails, let's say Rails, and Rails developer were kind of, it's like the Laravel guys usually go with let's say Vue.js, and because it's somehow integrated to the framework. It's like Rails and Ember, right? Everything was built for Ember. And I was working with Ember maybe a couple of months, and then Flutter 2 came out at that time. And I was just checking, and I think they mentioned that the CLI is based on Ember. It was based on the Ember CLI. It was very nice.
Yeah, Angular.
And because I was very familiar with Ember and CLI, I actually contributed several times to fix several things in Angular CLI at that time. That was the reason.
Nice. The Angular CLI is amazing. It is so amazing. Powerful. What they've done with it is crazy.
It's crazy. I agree. I mean, Angular still is one of, maybe by far it's my favorite framework in front-end world, let's say.
I've only ever written applications in Angular. The company that I work for now that I helped start, I'd never built a website prior to this. And now our whole platform is built in Angular. So I learned it on the go for sure. And I love it.
That's usually what I do. We learn on the go, and that's way better than like sitting and watching videos, so totally. Learn on the go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I started my journey with ASP.NET, dragging controls and then creating everything on the UI.
Yes.
That was fun too.
Yes.
Good old drag and drop.
Yeah. So let's move on, and I wanted to ask you about your journey. You mentioned in your newsletter that you used to work in Singapore, and then you gave a lot of interviews that you wanted to move out. So let's talk about that. How did you started, and then how you went to Singapore, and then from Singapore to Europe?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I've been in Malaysia, not Singapore. Very close though. So I think it was 2011 or 2011, which I'm originally Iranian. So I actually migrated from Iran to Malaysia, and I went there for studying, and particularly for studying English, to be honest. My English was terrible at that time. And so I went. Well, I don't know if it's good or not, but then we'll see. But yeah, so I went to Malaysia, and then I actually studied English for a year. Well, I didn't learn that much anyway, because it It was a new country, new culture, a lot to grasp. It was a lot of things actually. So then I started looking for a job anyway and found a job. So just quickly after maybe a couple of 9 months or like a year almost, I switched from studying to work and working for a company over there. And I've been there in Malaysia for 7 years. So I had actually a long history in Malaysia, a lot of stories and experiences. So one of those stories is where in the last 2 years where I've been in Malaysia, I felt like, okay, I think that's enough for me to stay in this country. I've been here enough. So now it's time to move on, go somewhere else. Especially all of my friends at that time, they were all migrating to different countries, Australia, Canada, particularly Canada. A lot of people went there, and USA, and some of my friends also went to Europe, Germany in particular. And I said that, okay, it's time for me to move on and just migrate for another country. And I decided to go to Australia first. I tried like as an immigrant and for the immigration process and all this stuff like that. So nothing happened for a year and a half, something like that. And then I said, okay, maybe I can find a job. And I started, applying for job strongly. So what I did was, which I actually mentioned in my newsletter, was that I applied over a year and a half almost for over 100 companies. Like, believe me, every day I went to to my like regular work in Malaysia, and then as soon as I was coming back home, my task was to sit, check Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, check the jobs, and check out who is looking for an Angular developer, Ember developer, front-end developer, JavaScript. I was doing a lot of JavaScript at that time, or maybe some backend. Also, I was learning DevOps at that time a little bit. Not DevOps, the terms is quite new, but like system administration or whatever you want to call it at that time. So I applied like for over 100 companies, and I got rejected like for maybe half of them. Not rejected, they didn't even answer. Like I applied and no one answered. But then I got 50 companies replying me. And when I'm saying 50, it doesn't mean like they have replied like in the day one. It took some time, right? I'm talking like for a year and a half. So all of these companies were very funny because some of them, I needed a sponsorship. That was very important for me. So as an Iranian, I needed to get visa to be able to migrate to Europe. Otherwise, it wasn't possible for me. So then I went to these interviews. It was not literally every week, but if you have like 50 job interviews over 1 year and a half, it's like 1 week, every week, one interview. But it wasn't like that. Sometimes in a week, I had 3 interviews or 4. Even in one day, I had 2 sometimes, I remember. But sometimes for 3 weeks or 4, I didn't have any. So, yeah. And the funny story is that I got rejected for all of them for 1 year and a half. Like, initially, it was so depressing. Like, in the first 3, 4, when I got rejected, especially when you think, I'm doing very well. Why I'm getting rejected? What the hell is happening? So it's very depressing. But then, I was, what I had in my head is that I have to go. There is no way for me to stay here. I have to migrate. Therefore, I should not stop. I will not give up. What I did was, and I mentioned in my newsletter, was like I was creating a job interview sheet in Google. And I started recording my jobs. First of all, it was too many jobs I applied. Sometimes I forget, did I apply for this job or not? Should I apply again? Because it's very unprofessional, to be honest, to apply twice to a job. So I started to record all of my applications, and whenever I went to an interview, I added 2 columns. Actually, I learned it after a couple of interviews. It wasn't like from the beginning. So after maybe fifth or sixth interview, when I was rejecting, I said that, okay, maybe I should think about what is causing this rejection. So I need to improve on that probably. So I started to adding 2 more columns and say, yeah, this is my weaknesses, and the other one is my probably strengths. So let's focus on the weaknesses first to improve, and the strengths to make sure that I don't fall behind, after all. So I started like adding these, weaknesses after each interview. So,
Mhm.
so what I did after each of these interviews, I just sat before even I get any rejection or approval, right? I sat with myself right after the interview and I said, okay, these are the questions where I was asked. Okay. So I answered probably these questions very well, and the other ones not very well. I don't know, for example, or someone I remember asked me about, like, for example, um, micro front or web component, which was very quite new, let's say, concept at that time. And I said, well, I didn't know, to be honest, anything about it that time. So, okay, this is a weakness. I need to know, at least I need to know what it is. When someone is asking, I need to say, okay, I know this is the concept, but I never worked with it. I didn't have a chance to work with it. So started writing all of these, weaknesses, and I started to improving every day. Every
Mhm.
day I woke up, I remember I try to go through these weaknesses and try to read them, and try to go and find some resources and some tutorials, articles, videos, different things, and try to even sometimes code some of these concepts to learn and understand them better. And believe it or not, after a year and a half, so I think it was my 50, well, not literally 51 or maybe 49, or I don't remember exactly, but around that number, which when I went, let's say after 40 or 30, interviews, when I went to these interviews, I felt like I'm I'm actually answering like a senior, like the one that has worked with all of these technology. And some of these people were so impressed. They're like, "How much do you know?" I said, "Well, I just know. I don't know how does it work exactly. I just know the concept."
Oh.
And yeah, so it was like a year and a half after the last interview, or a couple of latest interviews. So I got a interview with one of the companies where in Norway, where it was in Norway, and they gave me a task, and they said whatever you want to do, but these are the things we want, a list of things. It was very actually complex things in front end, and luckily they said, well, I had a lot of experience with Ember, right? Little experience with React or Angular at that time. They said whatever framework you want to choose. I was very lucky at this point, and they said, "Yo, build this and send it to us." And I did. I did in within 24 hours, like because I was in rush. I just wanted to do it. I just took a day off, and the whole day I was coding that single page application for that company with Ember. Whatever I knew, like whatever I learned over a year, I just applied, whether they want or not. I just applied to that, code base. I remember. And yeah, it was funny because I was kind of disappointed at that time because I thought that I might not be able to get a job in Europe due to different problems. It always, the rejections wasn't because of the technical interviews. Sometimes it was because of the visa issues or the process of the visa and stuff like that. So I was rejected. Like technically I was passed, but then
Mhm.
the paperwork around that didn't go through. So that was like very disappointing. But anyway, I was looking for, I said to myself, if I couldn't get a job after 50 interview, like let's say around that in Europe, then maybe I should try another country. Well, actually, I tried for Singapore, and I got a job in Singapore immediately. Like after
Oh,
the first interview, I got the job. And I remember I went to Singapore for the last inside, like one-to-one with managers and stuff like that. Technically, I was passed remotely. And I was in the airport in Singapore, and when I actually my airplane landed, I turned on my 4G and stuff like that, and then I got an email which was from the Norwegian company, which I did that, and I was waiting for them for about 2 weeks.
oh,
I have heard nothing after the task. I said to myself, okay, that's done. So I don't think I will get that job. Definitely, I will not. It's 2 weeks. But, I was in the airport in Singapore to go and sign my contract with the Singaporean company. And then I got this email.
oh.
So I got this email that, yeah, we want to give you an offer. And they send me a contract or like pre-contract. So if you want, sign this NDA, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, what should I do with the Singaporean company? So I promised them, and okay, here is the Norwegian company. So it's hard. So, well, I went to the company in Singapore and I said, yeah, to be honest, I got that job and I think I need to go to Europe instead of Singapore. So that was the whole story, very short.
Oh.
But yeah, so it's funny. It's a lot of stories. When I'm thinking, it looks like I was very crazy at that time. I don't know if I can do it again, to be honest.
Probably.
Wow, that sounds like a roller coaster ride. Like I know it took
Yeah.
place over a long period of time, but wow, just the last little bit there where it's like, oh, okay, fly to go accept this one, and surprise, there's
Exactly.
another one.
Let me tell you, actually, another funny part of this interview process was I was focusing on Germany and Netherlands in particular. Like I was actively applying job for Netherlands and Germany. No, and
Okay.
I only applied for Norwegian company once, and that was the job I got. It's in Norway. So, I mean, that's what I learned is that you should not maybe sometimes make a box around yourself and think
Yep.
inside the box. Sometimes you need to come back and think from outside, and maybe you see something else that you never have seen. So this is also a very important part of the interview. Don't get disappointed. Never give up, as I always say, and just try and always come back one step and then look at what you've done, and maybe you can try again differently.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So one last question, Majid, before we wrap up.
Sure.
So of course, I mean, you're in your journey for 1.5 years, you had a lot of rejections, right? I mean, and they are scary. I'm sure everyone agrees
Absolutely.
with that, right? Rejections are scary. Let it be anything, right? I mean, in your interview, in your life. So what is your suggestions to the developers who are actually going through the same phase? I mean, they are getting rejected and now they must, maybe they are disappointed. So what is your suggestions to them?
I mean, I think that disappointment comes from a mindset where you say to yourself that, okay, if you say to yourself failure or rejection is a part of success, you never get disappointed because at the end you will become successful. You need to think it this way. That's what I learned, from that process. If
Mhm.
I actually told myself at that time, okay, I failed 5 times and then that's enough. I'm not going to try. But then I failed 5 times or 10 times or 40 times. And every time I said, yeah, I learned something new. And I learned something new. Like I learned a new technology. I learned a new concept. I didn't know event loop with JavaScript. It took me a couple of months to understand how the hell JavaScript works. Because of my interviews, I had to learn it. There was no other way. And that eventually helped me to become a better developer, to understand everything around me. I mean, even sometimes I feel like I should go for interview, even if I don't want to change job, because in interviews you learn something that you probably don't know, and then they tell you, and it's just like it's like something. It's blinking here and say, okay, I need to go and learn this as well. This is something that probably I don't know and I should know. It's It's about my job. It's about my profession. I think this is the mindset everyone should have. Accept or embrace your rejections, and you never get disappointed. That's easy.
It sounds a lot like when you're building software, right? Like I'm a programmer most of my day and then CTO for part of my day, but I fail building things all day long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I fail until I get it right? And I mean, like, I know a lot of programmers, like I would say the overwhelming majority, if not every single one, never gets it right the first time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Even if you get it right, even if you get it right, there is always room for improvement, right?
Exactly.
You get it right today, but after 6 months, your code that you have written 6 months ago is depreciated, or it needs to refactor it again.
Exactly.
This is also the same process in life, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's right later, right? So
absolutely,
just keep learning, keep getting better, and don't let it discourage you, for sure.
Absolutely. Actually, I had another story in my newsletter. I wrote it last week or this week. Sorry, I named it "Consistent Learner." So it's another story of me, how I learned this concept after job interviews and how I learned my English. Like, this is also another story. I'm not gonna take your time. I know it's your overtime probably, but if someone likes to hear that, so this is also in my newsletter blog, so they can read it.
Yeah. So in case you want to follow his newsletter, it's already in the description of the video. You can subscribe to it. Go ahead and subscribe to it. I mean, why shouldn't? So
thank you.
Yeah. Think we don't have any more questions. Jay, anything you want to ask?
No, I just want to say thanks a lot for going through and telling us about your experiences. I've never really I've only ever applied to one tech company in my life, and that was Google, and I got rejected. so instead, I just started a company. So I can't really empathize with you, but I can only imagine what it would be like. So I'm sure it's nice for people going through that process to hear from someone saying, "No, don't worry. This is normal. It's fine. You'll be okay." So thanks for reassuring everyone that is going through that process. Yeah.
By the way, Jay, you are so lucky they rejected you, because I actually applied and never replied to me. So that's one step further than me. I guess.
At least I got an email back, I guess.
Yeah.
And I got rejected in first round. So.
Good.
Great. So yeah, I mean, but just one thing I want to add. I mean, I have also given a lot of interviews, and especially in case you are trying to switch technologies, even though you know things, I mean, go ahead and give as much as interviews you can. I mean, generally, because every organization has some other people, and they might be asking some other different questions. It actually helps you, because once you know all the questions, you can easily crack the interview. That's the secret.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, great. So thanks a lot again, Majid, for joining us. And I'll post about the video again on the Twitter, and you can also retweet. And that's it for the day. So thanks, Jay. Thanks, Majid, for joining us. And about next week, we don't have anything as planned as of now. For the next week, we have some meetups to attend at the same time. So I won't be available, but in case something comes up, we will tweet about it. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and subscribe to our Twitter handle as well, which is This Is Learning. And we will be back on 30th for sure. We will be discussing about, again, another community member who actually started with individual contributor role, and then he recently became an engineering manager. So we'll talk about his journey as well. So, yep. So see you later. Bye bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.